Hi scholars, we're going to start working on part 2 of the project. Part 2 of the project is polynomials, where we are adding and subtracting. So basically this is combining like terms. When we're adding, we have two different parts notated by the parentheses, and if we notice here, this part is that we're adding. So what I like to do again is I like to draw my shapes. So for my y to the fifth, I'm going to do a circle, and then for my y to the fifth over here, I'm going to do a circle. I need to make sure to include the coefficient and the sign. For the y to the fourth, I'm going to do a triangle. I need to make sure I include the sign. Sorry for that goofy looking triangle there. And for the triangle over here, I need to make sure I include the sign. And for the last part, we have our y to the thirds. I'm going to draw a square here, trying to keep in mind that I need to include the sign and the coefficient. And the same thing here, keep in mind that that 7 is positive. So really when we're doing this, since we all have y's, we should be putting the y first. That's to the highest power, which is the 5. So we have 3 of them here, and we have minus 2 here. So 3 minus 2 would give us 1 y to the fifth. But remember, we don't need the 1 in front, because if there's no number in front, it already tells us that there's 1 there. Now I'm going with my triangles. I have an imaginary 1 that's located there. And when I go to my other fourth, I have a minus y to the fourth, and again remember that there's an imaginary 1 there. So we have a positive 1 minus a 1, which is 0. So I don't need to write the next part because I have 0 y to the fourth, and since I have 0, it doesn't exist. For the last part then, we look at our squares. I have 2 y to the third here, and here I have, if I go back to my thirds, I have 7 y to the third. So I'd add the 2 plus the 7, which is going to give us 9 y to the third. So as we finish this top part when we're adding, our final answer should be y to the fifth plus 9y to the third. When we do our second type, that's subtracting, notice now how we have a subtraction sign here. So that subtraction sign needs to get distributed to everything that's inside that parenthesis. So this negative needs to go here, it needs to go here, and it needs to go here. So we're going to rewrite the problem where everything here stays the same. So it's 3x squared minus 8x plus 2. But now we need to rewrite everything over here due to the negative. So this positive now becomes negative. So I have minus 3x squared. This negative multiplied by negative is going to turn into a positive, where the opposite of a negative is a positive. So now this is plus 2x. And then this 5 was positive, but now it's the opposite of positive, which is negative, so now it's going to be a minus 5. And just like we did up top, we're now going to put circles or shapes around what we have. So around my x squares, I'm going to do circles. We need to include the coefficient and the sign. And then here's my other one. I need to include the coefficient and the sign. I'm going to use a triangle for my x's. I need to include the coefficient and the sign. My other x's over here, I need to include the coefficient and the sign. And for the last part, I'm going to use my squares. So I have a positive 2, include the sign. This is not a positive 5, that's a negative 5, so I need to include it. We're going to start with our variables first, our x squared. So I have 3 of them in this circle, and I have negative 3 of them here, which means those are going to cancel because 3 minus 3 is going to be 0. So I don't need that part. Now we come to the triangles, I have negative 8x here, and I have positive 2 here. So if I'm at negative 8 on the number line, negative 8, I'm adding 2, so I'm going closer to 0, which will give us the negative 6. So that would be negative 6x. Now I'm looking at the squares. I have a positive 2 here, and I have a minus 5 here, which means, again, if we are on a number line, if you have 2 and you got to go back 5, we go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That should take us to 1, to 0, to negative 1, to negative 2. We should be at negative 3. So 2 minus 5 would give us negative 3, and our final answer would be negative 6x plus 3. And that is adding and subtracting polynomials. Thanks.